Are you ready to unlock your full potential and maximize your productivity? Look no further than Productivity Smarts, the ultimate audio podcast hosted by renowned productivity expert Gerald J. Leonard. In every episode, Gerald shares captivating stories, invaluable tips, and cutting-edge strategies that will transform the way you approach productivity. Whether you're looking to reduce stress, overcome overwhelm, or simply get more done in less time, Productivity Smarts has got you covered. But that's not all. You'll also gain inspiration from real-life success stories of individuals who have achieved greatness through productivity. Plus, you'll learn the latest tools, techniques, and habits that will help you achieve a new level of happiness and fulfillment in your personal and professional life. So why wait? Join us every week as we delve into the exciting world of productivity and help you unleash your full potential. Get ready to take your productivity to the next level with Productivity Smarts. As a productivity expert and host of the Productivity Smarts podcast, Gerald J. Leonard has been a proud supporter of Kiva since 2011. Kiva is a non-profit organization that helps entrepreneurs in third world countries access the capital they need to start or grow their businesses. By making a small loan through Kiva, you can help these entrepreneurs achieve their dreams, support their families, and contribute to their local economies. And with a repayment rate of over 96%, your loan can be re-lent to another entrepreneur once it's repaid, creating a ripple effect of positive change. So if you're looking for a meaningful way to make a difference in the world, consider making a loan through Kiva. With loans as small as $25, anyone can be a microlender and help change lives. Visit kiva.org to learn more and start lending today.
Today, I have the pleasure of speaking to Sebastien Page, the author of the best-selling book, The Psychology of Leadership: Timeless Principles to Perfect Your Leaderships, Individuals, Teams, and Yourself. He joins me today to explore how sports psychology, positive habits, resilience, stress, and personality can shape leadership and productivity, both personally and professionally. He's also one of the top 10 or 15 voices on LinkedIn. Sebastien, how are you?
Gerald, I'm super excited to be doing this with you.
Excellent.
I love the podcast format, and we're recording this in the morning. Dan Pink wrote about how people have cycles throughout their day where they have more or less energy. I'm a morning person. I've had my coffee. I'm ready to roll.
I have my coffee too. Well, listen, I know you've had a chance to listen to the podcast, so you know I have a couple of questions for you because I'm a musician as well.
Yeah.
What is your favorite style of music?
So I heard one of your guests say classic rock, and I have to start with that. And prior guests have mentioned Pink Floyd. But if you look at my Pandora channels, I don't know if Pandora is still in or out, but if you look at my Pandora channels, it's actually all over the place. I like metal. I like Metallica. I have a whole Metallica channel. I like 90s punk music. I also like Irish punk. I'm a huge Bob Dylan fan, like old school 60s, 70s folk. So I'm kind of all over the place.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, listen, is there any favorite song that stands out for you or artist?
Yeah, look, I started with Pink Floyd, Wish You Were Here. There's almost an emotional reaction to listening to that song. It is just so beautiful. Just a
excellent, song. Excellent. Well, listen, you have had an amazing career, and obviously, I'll put all of your accolades in your bio. That'll be on the website and on the notes for the podcast. But what has made you so successful throughout your career? What do you think that one thing is about you that's really helped you become successful?
I just came across a study, Gerald, about how much IQ matters to your lifetime earnings. Because I like to give advice to students.
Right.
And the next time I give advice to students, I'm going to quote that study. It shows that after controlling for factors like personality and grit, your IQ accounts for 1% to 2% of your lifelong earnings. Just think about that.
Yeah.
So to me, the number one thing I would say, because we don't pay enough attention to it, especially in technical roles,
Yep.
is very simple. It's communication.
Yes.
Business is a team sport.
Yes.
No matter how good you are, if you can't pass the ball, you're not going to be welcome on the team and you're not going to contribute. So there are roles that feel like they're individual roles, individual contributors. That's probably where communication is even more important.
Yeah, it is.
Communication, communication, communication.
Yeah, and it's really important. And in fact, I actually had an opportunity to study with in the area of neuroscience with a lady named Judith Glaser before she passed away. And she wrote the book Conversational Intelligence,
Yep.
CIQ. And the idea behind it, and one of the biggest things that she said in her book was that conversations are much more chemical than they are verbal. Because when we're talking like we're doing right now, and we're having a great conversation, our brains begin to produce oxytocin, dopamine, GABA, and serotonin. So all of these positive neurochemicals are starting to be produced. So it makes you feel great about the conversation, engage, and you walk away going, man, I really enjoyed that. But when you get on a conversation and it's tense, your brain and the person who's listening to your brain is producing cortisol and adrenaline. And you walk away and your neck is stiff and you're feeling tense and you're going, something that wasn't right about that. So I totally agree with you. But that conversation not only is passing the ball, but it's also passing how we're making each other feel and engaging. And so we can learn to be better at communicating. And I think that's one of the things that you talk about in your book, in the psychology of leadership, is just the importance of relationships. I think that's the thing that stood out to me the most. What inspired you to write the book?
Gerald, I was stressed at work and I kept thinking, why am I stressed? It's a stressful job, right? I oversee 500 billion in assets. I work in money management, but I've been doing this for 25 years. I was
Right.
beating myself up for being stressed. I was stressing about stressing. I've done this many times. Why am I reacting that way? So I decided to talk to a sports psychologist. He lives in Maryland, where I am. His name is Dr. Daniel Zimmett. He's a
Okay.
fascinating guy,
Yeah.
expert in sports psychology, but also he holds 40 national titles in the sport of handball. 40. You know, the sport of handball is
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
like squash, but you smack the ball with your hands.
Right.
He
Right.
has 40 national titles. So we sit down and he starts with a story. He describes this as his best match ever. And it's amazing because he remembers everything about the match. He remembers where the ball was at point 9, point 10. At some point, he's telling me he's on his knees doing an extreme shot. And then it's a complete letdown because he goes, oh, then I lost the next 2 points. I go, what? You lost the game? And he goes, yeah. But to him, as a sports psychologist, the
Right.
mindset was he was playing a much, much stronger opponent.
Right.
And that day he realized he became able to play at a different level.
Yes.
And winning or losing did not matter in his mindset. That was his best match ever, even though he lost.
Yeah.
So we got into this mindset of sports psychology, and it is so unbelievably underestimated how sports psychology can help in all areas of life.
Yes.
You know, Gerald, we think of psychology as treating anxiety, depression, clinical
Right.
issues. It's
Right.
super important.
Right.
But as much as half the research in psychology nowadays
Yeah.
is about positive psychology.
Yes.
And if you look at sports psychology in particular, is how do you achieve ultra high performance? Athletes get stressed. How
Right.
do they handle it? So we got into the mindset of sports psychology. Then we covered positive psychology, and I started writing and writing and writing because I'm addicted to writing. I just love it. I do it on Saturday mornings and Sundays because I have a full-time day job in money management. You know, it took a while, and it was just to improve myself. As I say in the intro of the book, I go, you're reading this book for self-improvement. I wrote it for the same reason.
Excellent. Excellent. And that's why people are listening to this podcast. And that's why I do the podcast, because as I was sharing with you earlier, one of the most exciting things I have about my week is the authors I get to interview because I read their books. And, I'm excited about getting on and having this conversation because, I'm getting deeper in my knowledge and it's about getting better every day, right? And figuring out how to continually grow. And I think this idea of the sports psychology model is really important because you look at some of the greatest players in sports, many of them have lost as a number of games compared to the number of games they've won. Obviously, they've won
Yeah.
critical games that's kind of put them in the titles. We think of Jordan, or think of Kobe Bryant, think of Ray Lewis, think of Jerry Rice, but they've also lost a lot of games.
Yes,
And what's
sir.
interesting is that just like the sports psychologists that you work with, their greatest games may not have been the games that they won. It's the games that elevated them to the next level. And
Exactly.
that they knew that, hey, I just went to the next level of what I'm learning to do here. And then you're intrinsically motivated because you see yourself getting better.
And Gerald, sports psychology is not about winning. It's
Right.
about losing.
Yes.
It's about
that was what
learning
was
to
interesting in your
lose.
book. I was like, what?
Yeah. And, Roger Federer went viral over a year ago when he gave a commencement address
Right.
about his career as one of the top tennis players of all time.
Right.
And he told his students, I played about 1,500 matches. I've won 80% of them. But then he asked, what percentage of the points do you think I won? And the answer is 54%. So Roger Federer, one of the most celebrated tennis players of all time, won only about a little bit over half the points.
Right.
And so if Roger Federer loses almost half the time for each point,
Right.
we all need to rethink winning and losing in the mindset.
Right.
And that's what's fascinating about sports psychology. You think, and then you know what he said? He said, the myth of effortless excellence is just that. It's a myth. And talking to the sports psychologist, Dr. Daniel Zimmett, he coaches NFL level players, MLB baseball players,
Right.
and Olympic athletes. And he goes, look, you think these athletes don't get stressed? You think they don't feel anxious? He looks at me and he goes, they're all incredibly neurotic. They're all incredible. It's high pressure, high performance world. But they learn to reframe the stress
Right.
into activation, into
Yeah.
a source of energy, which I talk about in the psychology of leadership. But the best example I have of introducing sports psychology to the realm of ultra high performance, right?
Okay.
Let's all stop thinking about psychology in terms of depression and anxiety. I mean, these are super serious problems, and there's a really important role played by psychology. But what I want to introduce is ultra high performance. So Felix Baumgartner, have you ever heard the name?
No, I have not.
So it's kind of sad. I ask everybody, and he's really a special athlete.
Okay.
In 2012, he did something unbelievable. And as I tell the story, you might remember, he got up in a small capsule tied to a giant helium balloon.
Okay.
24 miles up to the edge of space. And then he did something amazing.
Yes. Okay. I do remember this story.
You remember that?
He jumped out. Yeah. He jumps out of the balloon.
Yeah. He jumped out and skydived.
Yeah.
He skydived 24 miles. He failed for 10 minutes, 4 of which were in free fall. He's the first human being to break the sound barrier. He had like a little suit and a helmet. He jumped from space. But what's fascinating, and it circles back to sports psychology, Felix Baumgartner, every step of the way in his training and the day of, was trained and coached by a sports psychologist. So I like to use that example as psychology is about treating clinical issues as much as it is about high performance.
Yeah, like you said, when you're playing at it, when you get to a certain level of business or sports, the game is really from the neck up. It's really from the neck up because everybody's kind of coming at one level with the same skills or the same talent, and it becomes a game of not even inches, but of neurons, right? Whether of neurochemicals, and whether you're positive and you can be resilient, or you can be gritty to work through the setbacks and the difficulties, and to see them as opportunities to hone your game and get better, right? Because it's not about when we're just successful and we're just kind of gliding through life that things are working. It's when we're having these ups and downs, but no one knows that we're going through it because we're managing it. And I think
Yeah.
that's really important. So let's jump into a couple of areas that I really wanted to talk about. And one of them is the PERMA model. You talk about that with Dr. Martin Seligman. You reference positive psychology throughout the book. And how can leaders practically apply Seligman's PERMA model, especially meaning, engagement, relationships, to elevate their personal or team productivity?
Love that question. I hate acronyms, and I'm in business and money management. We have almost as many acronyms as people in technology.
Well, you got
But
the stock market, which is nothing but acronyms.
yeah, exactly. But there's one acronym that I love from positive psychology, and that is PERMA. It stands for positive emotions, engagement, relationship, meaning, and accomplishment from a long term perspective.
Right.
It's fascinating how all of us, if we're not thoughtful, are all focused on positive emotions.
Yeah.
Short term, I want to have a good time with Gerald on the podcast. I want to have a good glass of wine with my friends. I want to laugh. I want to have a lot of likes on my Facebook posts. These are all positive emotions. And Seligman explains that, unfortunately, not all of us are predisposed to experience a lot of positive emotions. It's kind
Right.
of, there's a distribution of how people are wired around that, all the way to clinical depression. And I don't know what the opposite of that is, but, very joyful people day to day.
Right.
The key finding of positive psychology is that it's all about IRMA. Long term, if you want to thrive
Mm.
and lead a fulfilling life and a more fundamentally happy life,
Right.
it's about engagement, relationship, meaning, and long term accomplishment.
Yeah.
We don't talk about these things much in business.
Right.
I've spent over 25 years now in business,
Yeah.
but why not? I heard your podcast. You talk about it. You talk about culture a lot.
Yeah.
So, how do you foster engagement at work? How do you set up incentives so that people are engaged in their work? There are all sorts of tricks where you can get people in a state of flow at work.
Right.
Relationships. How do you improve relationships at work? You listen to the Productivity Smarts podcast and learn.
Right.
Number one. Number two, the feedback process is super important, and the culture and the
Yes.
trust. And then the meaning, it's become kind of a buzzword. What do we do with meaning at work? Why do we do what we do? But that's actually critical. And in the psychology of leadership, I go beyond the surface level of just find your why, blah, blah, blah. And I actually
Right.
give
Right.
practical examples of how to think and apply meaning in work. And the long term accomplishment perspective is super important as well, because it will allow you to embrace short term pains and short term setbacks.
Yeah.
And that's a mindset shift.
Exactly. Exactly. I've had the pleasure of working and being interviewed and working with Jack Canfield and Les Brown. Both of these men they're probably 80 or a little bit over 80 years old, and they are still engaged in the game. And what I learned from being around them is this, they're like really exemplary of the PERMA model, right?
Yeah.
They both have they're both positive about what they do, but here's what's really important is the accomplishments are the results of their engagement relationships, and the most important thing is it really starts with the meaning of why they're doing what they're doing, right?
Yes, sir.
They're pouring themselves into it because they see that what they're their speeches or their books or whatever makes an impact on people and it changes lives. So that gets them more engaged, and then they build these great relationships and the accomplishments happen, and the positive emotions become just a lagging indicator of the meaning that they're engaged in and the engagements that they're working in. So I just thought that was really fascinating, looking at your book and the folks that you've gotten to work with. And even I think you've had the chairman and CEO of GE
Yes,
write the
sir.
forward of the book, and that's like, wow, who gets someone like that to write the forward of your book? But that just shows one, engagement, relationships, and meaning and accomplishment, right? And obviously, again, the lagging indicator is positive emotions.
I really like how you position positive emotions as a lagging indicator of IRMA. I think that's very clever. And it's the right way to think about it.
Yeah,
We can't go day to day just seeking short term positive emotions.
right.
We have to think longer term. And in a nutshell, that's what the psychology of leadership is about. It's about the
Exactly.
long term mindset. When we talk about engagement, it's fascinating to me where we find engagement and where we don't. And there's a famous theory of flow in positive psychology and sports psychology, which basically says when you're in flow, you
Right.
kind of lose track of time, you're fully
Yep.
engaged, and you're essentially quote unquote happy, but it's a different kind of
Yeah.
happiness, right? You're like, oh my God, I've been playing tennis for 2 hours, and it's just like, I'm so engaged. I don't even know how long I've been playing, right? Or
Right.
I've been playing you're a musician, right?
Yes.
You get in flow with your bass, right? So
Yes.
I just remember when my first job was general building maintenance. I was maybe 15. I had zero work ethic. It's just another way of saying I was lazy.
I
But
remember the story.
I get this first job as a crew of two
Right.
maintaining commercial buildings throughout the city for a real estate owner.
Okay.
And we had all the equipment, the little pickup truck my friend was driving, and we had to mow the lawns, paint the walls, clean the factories, sweep the parking lots. And it was hot and it was a summer job. And it was just difficult, right? I just starting to do something to work. But looking back, there were certain tasks where time would fly. And then there were other tasks where I was counting the minutes until the break. So the question is, what made those tasks when time would fly different?
Yeah. It was flow.
It was
It was good.
flow. And
Yeah.
what made flow was I could notice progress.
Yeah.
If I could notice progress, mowing the lawn, for example, I would get in flow. Feedback, immediate. I
Yeah.
see the progress I'm making. And there's like a beautiful thing I'm doing with the lawnmower, right? And I was
Right.
paying attention. So the way you get the feedback and notice progress and set milestones can get you in flow, even for jobs that you might
Yeah.
think might not be that interesting.
Yeah. Programming, accounting, those kinds of
Yeah.
things. Yeah. If you get into it and you have that mindset, Csikszentmihalyi wrote the book about flow, psychology of that. And it's just really a concept that where you are so engaged
Yeah.
in the process and you are learning, you are experiencing, you are present. I think that's probably the
Yeah.
most important word is that when you're in flow, you are present at what you're doing. You're focused on what you're doing and you're seeing the progress. And then, kind of time kind of stands still. And it's obviously it's moving forward, but you lose track of it because you're so present. And I think, especially today, with all of the chaos and military this and so on and so forth, it's sometimes hard to remain in flow because we're so distracted.
Yeah. And if you're a leader,
Yeah.
a big question that I'm sure no leader thinks about is what can I do for my
Mm,
team to get in flow?
exactly.
And there's simple things you can do. You can like gamify the work, make sure that progress is celebrated, set up milestones, set up a report. We're 33% completed, whatever
Right.
it is, these little gamifications of the work. It's just so small things.
Yeah.
You can, then it clicks. And then people
Yes,
get in flow and it's fascinating. The other
exactly.
thing about flow that's counterintuitive that no one thinks about, but in fact, I can't pronounce his name. Csikszentmihalyi. How do you pronounce it, Gerald?
Chick sent me high.
Csikszentmihalyi. When he wrote about flow, he's the father of flow.
Yeah,
He talked about something that has huge applications for business that's not discussed nearly enough.
right.
He actually describes social interactions as a source of flow. You know,
Yes,
we all love to hate meetings, right?
right.
But you can get in flow, going back to what you said earlier, in conversations.
Yes,
We're having conversation right now. I'm in flow. I don't know how long
yes.
we've been going. I hope you're keeping time.
I'm keeping time.
But there's a human interaction element to getting in flow. Sometimes I'm with my steering committee and we have a tough problem to solve.
Right,
We're talking about strategy. We have big decisions to make.
right.
And the ideas are flowing back and forth. People are
Yes,
engaged. And I step back and look at the room and I go, oh my God, the team is in flow right now. It's like the
ye-
soccer team or in
yes.
your musical.
Oh yeah, when the band is playing, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So flow is much more of a social activity, if you
It
will,
is.
than people think. And that has huge applications in the workplace. How do I
Yes,
get the team in flow?
yes. Well, it's interesting, again, I got to move on because I got so many other questions I want to ask you. But I have to say this: I'm in a program where I'm learning about the neuroscience of social networks. And one of the things I think is Dr. Michael Platt, and he may not be a PhD in this. No, he is at the Wharton School and some other places. I think he's in Duke. But anyway, he talks about the social network of flow, and that from a neurological standpoint, when we're in flow, our heart rates begin to synchronize, our breathing rate begins to synchronize, and blood flow to certain parts of the brains begin to mimic each other.
Isn't that
And so and
fascinating?
so that's why a team or a jazz ensemble or a sports team, that when they get in flow, and what creates the flow, here's what was interesting that he said, that what creates the flow is when team members look at each other in the eye.
Yeah.
They
This says
do.
something about Zoom.
Yeah, but even on Zoom, because he talked about that too in this program, is that even on Zoom, as you're talking to the person, they can see your eyeballs and you see theirs, and you look into the camera. Sometimes it's kind of awkward to look at the camera because you're not really looking at the person on the screen. But if you look at the camera, then the person thinks that you're looking exactly at them. And then the other part that you're missing through Zoom is the hand touch or the touch on the shoulder, or the pat on the back or something like that. But those two activities, along with the conversation, increases the synchronization process that we go through as human beings. And that's how you can help get your team in flow, even on Zoom, which is really cool.
Yeah. And here's a tip I hadn't thought about, but I recently set up a prompter in my house. And for any people in your audience who work from home
Yes,
often, or maybe even full time, that might be the best investment you can make. Some of them are not that expensive. You
right.
get a prompter, you put the camera behind it. I'm using it right now.
Yes,
And you get the image of the Zoom in front of the camera. So you're constantly making eye contact with the camera.
yes.
These things, you can find them on Amazon. They're not that expensive. So, anyways, here's a tidbit of advice for those work from home folks.
Excellent. That's a good piece of advice. Well, listen, let's talk about core beliefs at work. You talk about upgrading your operating system and you dive into this concept of core beliefs. How can individuals identify unhelpful beliefs that hinder their productivity? And how should companies align team values to reinforce high performance around this concept of core beliefs?
Core beliefs are filters through which we view the world.
Yes.
They're basic assumptions we're making to interpret events. And sometimes we don't realize we have those core beliefs.
Yes.
There's a ton of research in psychology about this. But what does it mean for work? earlier in my career, I had a core belief about office politics that was counterproductive.
Right.
And I didn't realize it was one of my core beliefs. My boss used to say, Sebastian, you're hearing high frequencies. You know how dogs hear high frequencies that humans don't hear? I was
Yes.
hyper vigilant about politics, the politics of work, which are unavoidable as soon as you have more than two people in a team.
Right.
I was hyper vigilant to this. I was kind of worried about it. And I used to tell him, it's not paranoia if they're really after you. That's kind of a famous quip. But then I realized that's not a good core belief to go around your day with. And I
Yeah.
shifted it consciously with the help of a coach to assume good intentions. If you don't know what the other person is thinking, your default becomes assume the other person has good intentions. That's a different core belief.
Right.
And teams have core beliefs. Sometimes they write them in terms of values or in different documents where they say, we believe the consumer is always right. But my
Right.
point in the psychology of leadership is you might not realize all the core beliefs. They might be from something traumatic that happened to you before. So why don't you take a step back, personally understand your core beliefs, understand those that aren't productive, that aren't helping you, and maybe work with a coach, or just drink a strong cup of coffee, go for a walk, think about this. And then as a team, do the same. Get the team together
Yes.
and go, what are the 5 core beliefs we have as a team? And debate them and write them
Yes.
down. It can be incredibly productive because, I talk a lot about goals in the psychology of leadership.
Yeah.
And we think measurable goals they're super important, right? But some of the most important goals are not measurable. They're process goals.
Yes.
How do we get better at what we do? How do we run meetings more effectively? How do we tweak our core beliefs?
Right.
That's the operating system analogy.
Exactly.
And that is
Exactly.
unbelievably important to do. As money managers, we need to think about where we get the research, how we use the research, how we exchange ideas. These are all process goals.
Right.
And often they go by the wayside because we just want the quarterly revenue goal.
Right.
Because that's
Exactly.
measurable.
Exactly.
But a lot of your most important goals are not going to be measurable.
Exactly. It's kind of like what we were talking about with the PERMA model, or you would say the IRMA, right? Which is the engagement, the relationships, and so on. Those are soft areas, right? Except for the
Yep.
last one, accomplishments. And again, I think positive and accomplishments are lagging indicators to engagement, meaning, and relationships,
Yes,
right?
sir.
And so, so it's really important because the core beliefs or core values are the filters in which we see things. And depending on what our core values are, it's kind of like in neuroscience, it's called the reticular activating system. It's basically what you focus on over and over again, and you talk about this in your book as well. It begins to filter in or out what you actually see. So, two people can be standing there and watch the same event happen, but if their core values or beliefs are radically different, they're going to walk away with 2 totally different
Yes.
experiences.
Yes.
And they're going to see totally 2 different things. And they might even get in an argument or disagree if they're not open to being influenced by others, right? And that's how powerful this concept of core beliefs really are. So, it drives how we handle change, challenges, and opportunities. But if we can, like you said, get unified with our teams on what the core beliefs that we're going to espouse and focus on are, then it gives the team kind of like a unified vision of when events happen. People are they're always going to have their own unique way of seeing things because we all have our own unique perspectives, but they're going to be a lot more in tune.
And you have to mean it.
Yes.
Because sometimes those end up being nice words on a PowerPoint. I think we overuse PowerPoint in business.
Yes.
You have to truly mean it. I like to think of the bricklayers, Gerald, is a famous story, but it turns out it's kind of been lost a little bit. I ask audiences, do you know the story of the three bricklayers? And most people say they don't. It's an architect who walks to three bricklayers. He asks the first one, what are you doing? And the first one says, I'm tired. I'm laying bricks. I need to feed my family. He walks the second one. The second bricklayer says, I'm a wall builder. I'm building a wall. And he seems a bit more engaged. The third bricklayer says, I'm a cathedral builder. I'm building this awesome cathedral. And that one is super energized and engaged. All three are doing the same job. They're just thinking about it differently.
Exactly. And I remember that part from your book. And again, it's how we see things and it's our core beliefs of what we're doing based on how we really perceive what we're doing. So let me ask you this, because you also mentioned something, and I want to make sure I get the name right here. I think it's called Yerkes-Dodson curve.
Yes, Yerkes-Dodson's curve. Yeah.
Yes. So can you explain that? Because, it sounds like it's an area where we're encouraging leaders to tune the engine to optimize their stress or and I may be getting it wrong here, but can you explain that concept around Yerkes-Dodson's curve?
Of everything I researched for the book, this has been the most useful in my life, the Yerkes-Dodson's model. And the idea is very simple. Optimal performance does not occur at a stress level of 0, which means that stress activation can increase performance up to a point after which we all know stress is bad.
Right.
But the optimal is not 0. And that's good news because no one can walk around in life at 0 stress level.
Yes.
The sports psychologist told me, you think top athletes are not incredibly neurotic? They are. You think like you have to make the 3-point shot and there's 5 seconds left on the clock? You think you don't get a shot of adrenaline? So the Yerkes-Dodson's curve describes the relationship between performance and stress level. And guess what? There's a positive relationship at the beginning. Gerald, do you want your surgeon to be 0 stress? Like completely relaxed?
I want him to be on I want to be on his P's and Q's and ready to go.
Yeah. You want her to prepare and to kind of be engaged in this. So it's been researched through decades in psychology. There's some controversies around these models, but the basic fact is that we have different Yerkes-Dodson's curves for different tasks, which is interesting. Archery, your optimal performance will occur at a lower stress level. Yes. Powerlifting, I mean, get the adrenaline pumping.
Yeah.
Or like a 5K race. I'm a runner. I love running. You got to be activated. You got to have a high level of stress or activation.
Yeah.
So to me, it goes back to why I wrote the book. I was stressing about stressing. And when you start looking at these curves and how they change for different tasks and how you can improve your own curve, you can improve your stress tolerance and change the shape of it. It just opened a whole world of removing the layer of stress that I was adding from stressing about stressing.
But as you're talking about this, and I'm looking at, the picture of Baltimore in the background. And as we talked about earlier, I lived in the Maryland area for 18 years, or is my favorite team. As you're saying, stressing about stressing and kind of getting yourself on edge. And at the beginning of, back in 2012, that time period where the Ravens had Ray Lewis and Ed Reed and all those guys playing, what would Ray do? He would come out and he would do this little dance that would get the entire audience, get himself, get his team members just geeked out, stressed, whatever that is, just taking it to a whole nother level. But that wasn't like just some little passe dance, right? I mean, he'd pick up grass and throw it and stomp, and he would basically get himself physiologically totally engaged in the game. And I'm sure that had some stress in it. and it probably very stressed out the opponent when they saw this guy coming.
Yeah, I'm not sure I could do a dance like that before a board meeting, but but this is actually a really useful trick from sports psychology, is that you start feeling anxious and stressed and you reframe it. It
Yes,
becomes a source of energy. It motivates you to prepare, first of all,
right,
because if you're not activated, if you're not anxious about something, you're not going to prepare as much.
exactly,
And so the athletes, their ability to reframe the stress as a source of energy and activation and a fuel for performance.
right,
This is really liberating when you realize that and you look at these Yerkes-Dodson curves. Now, I want to be very clear. There's a level of stress that where you choke
yes,
and it becomes detrimental. And it's well researched that it's incredibly unhealthy to be chronically stressed. We all know that. I think
right.
what we need to think about is the beginning of that Yerkes-Dodson's curve. So
Right.
I explain all of these in the book and how you can improve your own stress tolerance.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting because the Marines, when they're dealing with high pressure, intense situations, they do box breathing, right? So
Yeah.
even in their situation, walking into a military, campaign, at any moment, something can happen, my life can be taken, bomb could go off. That's an extremely stressful situation. And yet they've learned how to handle that. And they do it through box breathing, through mindfulness, and so on. As we're moving on, I think we're beginning to, kind of get to our time here. Again, I have so many other areas I want to talk to you about, like the control thought theory and leadership, personality at work, the big five, just the idea of cognitive resilience, also the concepts. I mean, we've been talking about this for a while as well, which is sports psychology at work, where we look at, how athletes are coached and handle, the pre-performance and visualization process that they
Yep.
go through. And so I'm probably just going to, I'm going to take one or two more of these and then we'll kind of land the plane here because I could actually talk to you all, for a couple more hours about this
Yeah,
topic.
likewise. Likewise.
And again, I really love the book and you have some amazing stories
Thank you.
and concepts in there. And it's very well researched, very well written. And again, although you don't have a doctorate in psychology, you have worked with a PhD in psychology who's validated your work. And I think
Yes.
that's just as important because I love, material from peer reviewed, so it's basically like your work has been peer reviewed by, psychologists who have the degrees and
Yep.
CEOs of major organizations that said, hey, this guy has put something together that really is based on psychological principles, research, and so on, and that you can getting this book is going to help you move forward because it's created by the way we are wired to work. It has a lot of truth in it. I am curious about control theory and leadership. Can you explain that? Help us understand what does that mean? Feedback loops, making better decisions, sustain long-term focus. Let's talk about that for a second.
This is about decision making under uncertainty.
Okay.
That's what we do as leaders.
Yeah.
Decision making under uncertainty.
Yeah.
Most leaders have a bias towards action. That's how you're successful. People throw stuff at you and you make quick decisions.
Yeah.
Very few leaders are able to exercise strategic patience when they need to.
Right.
There are some decisions that will benefit from you taking your time to make the decision. And that is not intuitive for 99.9% of the leaders.
Exactly.
I just made up that percentage, but it's probably close. It's not intuitive. And so there's a simple question that I encourage people to use in their lives and people as leaders. How much time do we have to make that decision? And the models of control theory show you that if you have time to make the decision, then your standards should change over time. Let me illustrate this. Suppose you and I decide to walk around Boston. I don't know why I picked Boston randomly. We decide to walk around in Boston looking for a restaurant.
Okay.
And we have 1 hour before we're going to get really hungry. As we begin to walk around, we pass by a restaurant. Our standards should be high because we
Right.
have an hour left. And think about hiring an employee, for example, right? If you have time, take the time. And then the standards go down, 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 and there are mathematical models that describe this. And then at the end, we'll just pick whatever, Chuck E. Cheese, like, because we're just going, right? And the standards will be very low.
Exactly.
So strategic patience is an unbelievably underrated leadership skill, the ability to not make a decision and wait it out and see what happens. For example, two people come to you and they have a conflict between them and they want you to solve it. If you keep doing this, stepping in and solving every difficult interaction, you're not helping your team.
Exactly.
You're better often, not always, waiting it out.
Yeah.
And then they might learn to resolve it amongst themselves.
Exactly.
That's another example of strategic patience. People don't like to hear this. I present this to business teams and they go, no, we need to move fast. We need to be leaders. We need to innovate. Of course. But there are plenty of decisions where strategic patience is the key.
And I really believe that when we are presented with a really difficult situation, if we can take some time and assess what's going on and then step away from it, even for an hour or two, go take a walk, go run an errand, maybe put it off over the weekend and come back to it on Monday. Neurologically, what you're doing is you're saying, okay, brain, taking all this information, and now I'm going to let it go. And when you let it go, what happens is your non-conscious mind jumps in and goes, we have a problem. We got to figure this out. He's processed it as much consciously as he's going to, or he or she's processed it as much conscious as they're going to process it. And they've actually now handed it over to the non-conscious mind, which is much more powerful than our conscious mind. So think of the non-conscious as the hard drive, a couple of terabytes, and the conscious mind as the RAM, maybe 32 gigabytes, right? Much different in space. And so what becomes really important is how valuable is that time spent when you give your brain time to process it. And we have to trust that process. And leaders who do that tend to make better decisions because, one, they're allowing the information to ruminate, to kind of figure it out, and then make that decision based on giving it some time. And I've seen that to be a pretty positive result from leaders as well. What are your thoughts?
But you let the immediate emotional fight or flight response pass. Yes. I guess the takeaway, Gerald, is we should tell everyone listening, procrastination sometimes is a good thing.
Exactly. Well, Sebastien, where can people learn more about you? Where can they get your book? Where can they look up information on you? How can people get in touch with you?
Well, please go buy The Psychology of Leadership on Amazon. I look at my rankings and I want them to go up. So please help me. Otherwise, I'm on LinkedIn. That's the best way to find me. And I post a lot of content around my day job, money management, but also leadership and self-improvement.
Excellent. Well, Sebastien, this has been an amazing conversation. Again, what an amazing book, The Psychology of Leadership. And I have thoroughly enjoyed reading it. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. And I look forward for this podcast to be published and produced. And I know people are going to get a lot of value from it. And if they pick up your book, they're going to get a ton more value from what you've put down on paper. And not only just all the accolades you've gotten from it, because I really believe that it is, well-researched, peer-reviewed, and a solid body of knowledge that people can really grow from. So thank you so much for doing that and for sharing.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun, Gerald. I really enjoyed it. And thank you to your audience for listening.
Excellent. If you're enjoying the content and finding it valuable, we would appreciate it if you could take a moment and leave us a review. Your feedback is important to us and helps us reach a wider audience. If you leave us a 5-star review, it would mean the world to us. Not only does it help us improve the podcast, but it also helps us attract more sponsors and grow our community. Thank you again for your support and for listening to the Productivity Smarts podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to Productivity Smarts, where we help you achieve your goals and live your best life. We hope you've gained valuable insights and actionable strategies to boost your productivity and increase your happiness and fulfillment. Remember to apply what you've learned and keep striving towards your goals. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our podcast for more inspiring episodes and expert advice from our host, Gerald J. Leonard. Until next time, keep pushing forward and unleashing your productivity smarts.